Hey, Elwood City Limits listeners, it's Will here. I'm going to try and keep this quick. Hey, it's another episode where Lucas is a little bit busy, so I've enlisted a special guest. Sometimes I think I tend to drag this part out, but you guys want to get to the episode as quick as possible. Plus, this is a big one, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. Here's what I want to hit before we get going. Of course, elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com if you want to send us email. There's actually no email this week, so we'll be getting back to those in June, because coming up next week is going to be our episode of For the Kids, which is on patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. We're going to be talking about Blue's Clues. I'm very excited to be starting to do research on that really soon. If you want to join our Patreon for pay what you want, you can literally pay $1 and listen to all of our back stuff, including episodes of For the Kids and ECL Origins. Remember our latest episode on ECL Origins? Me and Lucas talking about Dragon Ball. It's a great episode, so I would definitely recommend you listen to the whole thing. If you want to, the previews are on the free feed, and you can see what that extra content sounds like. Otherwise, patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. Some patrons that I want to give a shout out today include Joe Sue and Riley Stevens, Kevin Noon and Caitlin Harrington Robinson, Owen and Hannah Lee, Sydney Long and Bob Yee. Thank you to Americana Dream and Derek Richopo. Thank you to Maria Gisselquist, Cecil Robinson, and Mamata. Thank you to Maisie Rose Sterling and Tiki Barber Fan. Thank you to Aaron L. and Ashmita. And thank you to Jared G. I also want to say thank you to Genna/Jen, who is our patron and is our guest this week. That would be Genna Buck. No, TV Tropes readers, not that Genna. This is a different Genna. She will introduce herself. This is a great episode. I'm really proud of it, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Oh, and one last thing. Speaking of patrons, late happy birthday to Peebs. Peebs' birthday was recently, and Peebs is a wonderful resource for the Arthur community. If you're on the Patreon, check out the Discord. Peebs posted a YouTube link to demo versions of Arthur songs that somebody who worked on the show recently put on YouTube. So check that out over there. One more time, patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. Oh, and of course, I didn't mention this in the episode proper with Genna. The next episode of Elwood City Limits, which is going to come your way in June, we're going to be talking about Muffy Misses Out and Arthur Takes a Stand, which is a big one, and I'm really looking forward to covering that. But right now, let's get into this week's episode with our special guest, Genna Buck. All right, time once again. I feel like this is happening with a bit of regularity. At least once a season, we invite a guest on to talk about an episode that we are covering. And this time, the guest is somebody that I have podcasted with, but you will hopefully get to hear it soon. It's not available yet, but let me tell you, the podcast experience I had with them was very good, and I've been waiting for the opportunity to get them to talk about Arthur. So please welcome to the show, Genna Buck. Hey, Genna.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really glad to have you here. I wanted to make sure that, you know, we only have so many episodes left of Arthur that there's a couple of people that I was like, I want to make sure we have one episode with them, at least one, and the time has come now. So you've been wanting to be on Elwood City Limits for a couple of seasons here, but to set it up, I did want to ask about your history, your relationship with Arthur here, because I think that you are interested, but I wonder how much a part of your life it has been to this point.
Arthur was very important in my childhood. My parents concealed the existence of television channels other than TVO. So I grew up in Ontario. So I watched my local TV Ontario public television station, and they had a afternoon block with Arthur and Magic School Bus back to back. So in the 1990s when I was growing up, Arthur was really big in my childhood. My little brother had an Arthur-themed birthday party. They used to sell Arthur accessories, like an Arthur party pack, and they all wore little Arthur glasses at the birthday party. And I have so many memories of watching Arthur, and my mom, I still walk in on her watching Arthur by herself. I think that this is like, she has this deep nostalgia for it because she associates it with our childhood.
Okay.
So she's like a way bigger Arthur fan than me and will quote relevant episodes of Arthur in everyday life. And I realized recently, as I was, getting ready for this podcast, that my local TV station did not have access to the entire canon of Arthur because we watched a lot of the same episodes over and over. And specifically, there's one I remember seeing so many times, which was the Locked in the Library episode. And I realized,
classic.
I'm pretty sure that my local TV station only had maybe the first 2 or 3 seasons of Arthur and would just repeat them. So I'm
honestly that's clean living. Like,
yeah,
everybody knows about my biases towards the early seasons of Arthur because that's what I grew up on. But like that's kind of all you need, really, if you ask me.
I don't think I realized that the canon of Arthur extended so far, and that there was a upside down version of 3rd grade where you're still in 3rd grade, but technology is rapidly changing around you, and now there's YouTube.
That's a funny way to think
Time
about it.
is
Yeah,
bending,
absolutely.
right? They're in like some kind of bubble, and they never age, but around them the world is moving on.
Well, we run into it a couple of times in this episode, and we will talk about it. What's interesting is that, so you mentioned TVO, which is public television in Ontario, which is what we've been using for me and Lucas and I. That's the uploads that we've been using to watch in the last few seasons. So TV Ontario has a YouTube channel, and they just have these Arthur episodes for free for people who live in Canada, which is what the one I sent you.
Yeah, I know. I really appreciate that. I assume that it's geo-blocked elsewhere.
Yes, it is. But it's just such an interesting, because it used to be that there was a time from, I want to say, I'm totally guessing, but like seasons like 8 to 15 or something, where we would have to like really comb high and low for these Arthur episodes. But in the last few seasons, they've just been uploaded onto TV Ontario's YouTube channel, and we end up being very grateful to them for that.
But that is how kids want to consume this content these days, right? I think there's probably lots of children who grew up with Arthur that have never encountered it on like linear television. They've only ever
100%
encountered it this way.
Especially kids in America who have access to the PBS Kids app, which is not similar to like a Netflix or streaming app where you can just watch Arthur episodes at a click. We in Canada aren't so lucky just yet. But this is the next best thing, is that these newer episodes are available on TV Ontario, thankfully, and it makes it easier for Canadians like you and I to watch. Okay. I'm going to ask you to just dive back into your memories if you can, because one of the things I love to ask new people and guests on the show, obviously Locked in the Library, big episode for you, and it's interesting that we are going to be talking about another library-focused episode here. Do you remember if you had a favorite character and who it would have been?
There's several that I resonated with, and including one that I think is not your favorite character, which was the brain, because I was indeed a little mini neurodivergent, actually, child. And I earned myself several children's television themed nicknames. One of which was DA, like from Magic School Bus, because she says, according to my research.
Oh, yeah.
And the other one was the brain. And that people would start to, like my parents and siblings would start to call me the brain, or start to repeat whatever I said in the brain's voice when I was a child, because I so deeply resembled that character. But the one I identified the most with was Francine, because Francine has like a strained relationship with femininity, which is something that I really appreciated with and resonated with as a kid, and that I still resonate with today. She is always like in a push-pull relationship with being a girl. And I loved how Arthur represented that in a kid-friendly way. And she's a foil to Muffy, who is fully in the stereotypical femininity.
That's a really interesting way to look at that. And I do appreciate that, like, characters like the brain do resonate with some kids, because I guess it kind of tells on Lucas and I that neither of us were necessarily like the ones valued for our intelligence or the ones thought of our as our intelligence. So there were kids who, like, it's sometimes it's easy to forget, but like there were kids like you, like the brain, like Dorothy Ann from the Magic School Bus that are just like, yeah, the actual kids.
Yes,
this is for them.
This is a recognizable type of kid. This is, that exists. It's representation for annoying kids. And I thank you. I'm represented in this show. The annoying kid community. Finally, we're on TV.
And really, I think I always think of like DW as annoying kid representation, but that's more like little
sibling representation.
Yeah, exactly. We do need that annoying kid representation. Okay, maybe that'll help me to see Brain in a bit of a different light. But I'm also very glad that one of the episodes here that we're going to talk about right now is Francine focused, because I'd love to hear more about your Francine feelings as we go through this, because we're starting off. This is, of course, season 21 of Arthur. This is airing in the mid 2010s. By now, of course, to you, Genna, the animation probably looks quite a bit different than the kind that you would have been used to.
Yes, and I can't quite put my finger on what is different in a technical sense, but
sure.
It feels just like qualitatively different. How do you guys think about it? Because my notes say animation, question mark. I couldn't quite figure out if maybe the way that almost like the metaphorical camera is pointed at the animation is a little different. The kids look a little bit different scale. Like they almost kind of look taller, something, and maybe the backgrounds look a little different. I think the animation might be a little less dynamic. There's a little bit less movement. What is the difference? What am I seeing?
So the difference, when you and I would have been watching, you and I are around the same age, so we would have encountered Arthur around the same time. In those very early seasons, it was hand-drawn animation. It was the kind that you and I would have been used to from the 90s, from animation that would have been shipped overseas and then shipped back. So this one is made with a program called Toon Boom Harmony, and if for listeners who want the full explanation, the premiere episode of season 20 is where we go way into it. But basically, this is a computer program for animation that is used across the animation industry in a lot of different contexts. So, like, there are Disney films that use this same technology, but it is here in these later Arthur seasons is used in the way it is here. Before this, there were a couple of seasons that were made with Adobe Flash.
Oh, wow.
Which was where, so there was a big switch from traditional like cell animation that had a little bit of digital in it eventually to Adobe Flash, and it looked way, way different. And that was where we ran. And Lucas and I, famously, as we've said many times, we had to really get used to the way it looked because it was so different. It moved differently.
Yeah.
It was colored a lot brighter, and it was a lot to get used to. So with this one, Toon Boom, it looks decently enough like the seasons that came before it, but the movement is a bit more dynamic. It looks a little bit less. Lucas always talks about how in the Flash seasons, there was like a paper doll effect where it looks like instead of the characters moving of their own volition, they were being moved. And I think there is still a little bit of that, but I think this is the best that it's looked. I mean, it's a different program altogether, but this is the best that the new animation has looked, and it is because it is using a widely used program. It's also, Arthur was produced out of Ontario.
Interesting.
When it was, I mean, so originally it was CNR in the hand-drawn animation, which was Montreal-based studio, and the voice actors often recorded out of Montreal. The animation for Arthur, including the animation that is made now with the Arthur digital shorts, does come out of Ontario. It might even be Toronto precisely, but it is made in the same country that Arthur is produced in. Oh. Although Arthur is thought of as an American property, it has always had deep, deep Canadian roots.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. I didn't know that at all. This season does like, I think, like from a kid's point of view, you wouldn't necessarily see it as looking any different than the classic seasons of Arthur. I don't think I've seen any of the Flash seasons, but I know what a Flash game looks like. So I can imagine what that would look like, and that it's just slightly uncanny.
A little bit, yeah. And definitely if you're watching through the whole series like we are, it's definitely a bit of a shift, but it's always good to remember that for some people who may be listening, or maybe if they're old enough to listen, that may be their nostalgia. So
true.
We try not to be too hard on it.
It's
because,
their home season, right? It's the one you love, the one you grew up with always.
Well, and I imagine that for as much as I like to say how much I love the earlier seasons of Arthur, I can imagine there will come a time, if it hasn't arrived already, where some kids will watch it and be like, this is old, I don't like this.
Yeah.
Because that's how I used to feel about, like, shows that were made before I was born when I was a kid, even though I might like some of them, and others would be like, this looks old, I don't like it. So unfortunately I love the way those looks, but this is more what kids are used to, and it is very useful for a dynamic presentation, as we'll see throughout this, including a very involved James Bond parody, which is how we start off
okay.
Francine
yes.
and the Soccer Spy. Every Arthur episode, Genna has a cold open before we get to the title card. And in this one, Francine is Agent 008, which I feel like there was an Agent 008 somewhere in James Bond. It's not that much of a sillier name, who's been assigned by M, who is played by Muffy, to catch a spy, to hunt down a spy. And we get this big chase scene through familiar James Bond-y locales. There's like a rocket launch, there's a casino, there's a car chase on a canyon, all that kind of stuff.
It was so... I was wondering if this is a cultural touchstone that kids who are Arthur age when they're watching this are going to resonate with. Like, do kids know what James Bond is? This is for the parents, right? It has to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I will make mention of this a couple times. Of an interesting phenomenon that is in these later seasons of Arthur is that there are references to old Arthur episodes, like ones from the seasons 1 to 5 era that, like, well, if kids are watching this, they don't, unless they have been shown those by their parents, they don't know what those are. So those are for the Arthur old heads, like me, or and you, who would recognize them.
Oh, I love that. There's like fan service to Arthur
absolutely.
fans. Adult Arthur fans.
Absolutely.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and of course, this is a parody of James Bond, but it is just generally like spy stuff. It's enough with the serial numbers filed off that you can kind of understand what it's going for. But there is an even direct parody of the James Bond opening title with the barrel of the gun, except Francine throws a water balloon.
I saw that, yeah.
And then after the chase is over, the Francine reveals the spy who's wearing this top hat and a cape and covering their face. It actually turns out to be Francine. So it is, I don't know, I don't think that was ever a twist in a Bond movie or book, but it does relate to what the episode's about.
I loved that it's going to call back to that in their real life. I don't think that I had noticed these cold opens before when I was watching the show as a kid, or had quite like conceptualized how they fit in or don't fit in to the canon. Like, are they supposed to be a dream? Are they just an introduction for you to start thinking about what's going to happen in the episode?
Right.
What are these for?
They are frequently to set up the story and even the theme of the episode in a less bound to reality way. A term that we used to use in the earlier episodes is oh my gosh, I just blanked on it. But talking about how magic realism, which is basically how Arthur, even in the episodes, relies on. Like, sometimes there will be a little wink and a nod to something that, if Arthur is meant to simulate real life, that couldn't strictly happen.
Right.
And so the episodes themselves do that, but the cold opens are where they can be as imaginative as they want to be, and just talk about the episode that's coming up without having to adhere to strict reality rules. So it could be a movie parody, it could be a dream sequence, it could be, like, often it's Arthur posing a hypothetical directly to the camera. We used to call it Ferris Buellering to the camera because he will address the audience directly, but there's no fear in breaking the rules in the cold open.
And am I misremembering, or were there alien characters in these?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there frequently have been, and they are also like one of the biggest points of magical realism, because it's like, do they really exist?
Yeah.
Are they just like a fun little wink? It's never confirmed.
They slightly encroach onto the canonical universe, as I recall. Yes, and I remember being like mind blown as a kid on that. One thing, so my brain was going through like a few different things as I was looking at this. One was like it doesn't just call back to James Bond. It also calls back to sort of classic childhood cartoons for us. Like it was giving a bit of like Inspector Gadget for me.
Okay. Yeah.
And I also, so there's a moment later in the episode that I realized, I watched it twice. I realized that I think I misheard, which is that one of the kids refers to Francine as like Francineski or something. And I was like, wait a minute, are they sort of tapping into the cultural script of this is like a Soviet or Russian spy? and but even the James Bond aesthetic, like it calls to that, right? And so my brain is going to, was there an Aardvark Cold War? Are there Aardvark nukes?
Well, probably that was calling her Agent Frensky. Frensky's her last name.
Oh, it's Francine. Oh, so I couldn't figure out what that was because I was like, is Frensky a thing kids call each other? But no, it's her last name. Okay, I get it. That's so, okay, well, But
tell me more about this. Tell me more about this Arthur Cold War. Like, does the Bay of Pigs have a double meaning in this world where pigs are people?
Right, yeah, I know, it's, if you go too far down it, your brain will break. Right? It's similarly to like they celebrate Christmas. So I was like, okay, was there Aardvark Crucifixion? Aardvark Pope? Aardvark Schism? Aardvark Martin Luther nailing Aardvark 95 Theses to the church door? Right? Like you can take this to preposterous ends.
Oh man. So yeah, let's bring it back in again.
Please,
yeah. Trust me, the words animal hierarchy on this show have basically been our brains breaking.
Oh my goodness, they have. I'm sure you have spilled many hours talking about how do they have pet dogs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So this episode itself is about how it's soccer focused, which is frequently for Arthur. It's one of the sports that the kids play in a team frequently. And it starts off with them being beaten in soccer by another team named Mighty Mountain. Now, Mighty Mountain is something that has been in the show since the first season. It's just like a rival school for Lakewood Elementary, which is where they go to school, for them to feud with. And they get beaten 5-0, which is pretty bad. And Arthur jokes that there may be a spy that was feeding Mighty Mountain information, which Francine eventually takes a little bit too seriously. But we'll get into it a bit later. There's something about this whole setup that to me felt a little bit false. But like, yeah, Mighty Mountain is their frequent rivals here.
There is a assumption embedded in this. I think what you might be bumping on, which is like you can't win at soccer by doing reconnaissance. That's just not how soccer works, right? You don't steal the other team's secret and then out strategize them. You know, it's not chess. So except in this case, because we do see Francine creating this complex diagram for their strategy that they are running. So in this case, like you could potentially gain an advantage. There's another aspect to this, so this will likely be unfamiliar to you. This is a character whose name is LaDonna. Mm-hmm. So LaDonna's family is having the Torres family over. LaDonna's family is an army family. The Torres family, his dad is in the Navy. This Torres kid, his name is Danny, and he is going to Mighty Mountain. He and LaDonna make friends here. So just to briefly explain, LaDonna is a character who was introduced in the first Flash season. She is the newest character, along with her little brother Bud, who is frequently a companion for DW. They are generally, like, their character type is that they're from Louisiana, but they have moved around a lot because LaDonna's dad is in the army. I think they were most recently and for the longest time in Louisiana, which is where her accent comes from. Oh, that's sweet.
What do you think of LaDonna? Like, let's just generally, from this one half episode with her, did you get any feelings about her?
I feel like the only character trait we're getting from her is I'm from a military family. And I'm just a generally happy-go-lucky kid. You know, she's so true neutral. Like, she feels like she is like a generated character. And she also is very gender funky. Like, she doesn't have gender hardly. I know they're using she, her for her. But, like, there's not gender signifiers on her. If you were just to look at the animation without hearing them speak, you wouldn't get any gender from her, which I thought was really interesting. I guess LaDonna is sort of a feminine name, but it's not a familiar name.
That's true.
But she doesn't have a ton of, she's like cute and friendly, but she doesn't have a ton of personality. What's your response to her?
Well, I mean, we've litigated this
Okay.
a time and again, especially with Bud, who is thankfully not in these episodes, who Lucas and I are openly not fans of. But basically, I think that your reading is correct, even from what little that you've seen of her, because LaDonna kind of doesn't have all that much of a character. A lot of her character episodes come from her neuroses around being someone that finds it hard to make friends because she moves around a lot, which is something that they do stick to. But she's also like a lot of her character is her accent, and one of her biggest traits is that she likes to tell stories. Like, she likes to tell fantastic stories, which is how she started on the episode. So I don't dislike her, but yeah, true neutral is a great description. Like, I just don't have a lot of strong feelings about her.
And you would have trouble like describing her to someone else and having that person like craft her. Do you know what I mean? She doesn't have like cartoons lean on each character having their distinctive thing that makes them them. And she doesn't have that. Yeah. Like, the brain is the brain, you know? Like, you could easily create a caricature of him, no problem. But LaDonna, there's just not that much there, a little bit underdeveloped. I did really like the plot, though. I like that family interaction, which I would like to talk about more.
What's interesting is, of course, is that LaDonna came in like, season 17 or 18? So there's been nearly 20 years of the characters of Arthur being the characters. And then here's a new one. Yeah. And it's not exactly fair to expect her to be as fully formed as they are, even a few seasons in at this point. Like, she just hasn't had the time there. What did you want to talk about with the family interaction?
You know, I have a lot of thoughts about the representation of the military in this, and what we're going to, I think, like, talk about it more critically. And I want to tell you a little bit about some of the, like, things around how military is represented in entertainment media that comes up in the later segment, in the interstitial segment, that causes me to read this episode differently. But one thing I really, really appreciated that I think kids who are actually Arthur age, which, what are they, like 3 to 9, maybe? Yeah.
I'd say that's,
that they, there's representation here for the military families and the trauma that those kids experience from that family separation that they're chronically dealing with, and that upset, right? And that constant social strain of making new friends. And the part that I really liked, and like, you know, I think that we don't always do a good job kind of thinking about the social emotional struggles of Gen Alpha kids, who these now are. And we see this new character being introduced, this kid from the other military family who LaDonna is like all over him, being like, I will make you my friend, right? And she's like, it's modeling empathy, where it's like, I've experienced this as a military kid. I understand what you're going through. I am going to make an effort to include you, which I really, really appreciate. That's such a positive thing to model for kids. And then you see him shutting down, getting overstimulated, feeling like it's too much. And then she understands right away because she's been there. She's like, he's like, I'm feeling, and she goes, overwhelmed. And that is such good modeling. That is exactly what you want to see in a kids show. Now, add the military element to it, and it becomes a little bit more troubled and complicated. But
interesting.
I loved seeing that.
We will talk about that again when we get to the middle segment here. But that's a really good observation. One that it kind of breezed over me because, of course, I watch an Arthur episode a week, so I only spend so much time thinking about certain things. But you're right, and that is, of course, one of the strengths. The ongoing strengths of Arthur is it being a model for certain values without being like too schmaltzy about it, I guess. And empathy is one of those that it has always encouraged in terms of. And making people feel welcome and accepted. It's a show about a group of friends, so there's all the ups and downs of like trying to make friends with people who are fundamentally different from you, and I think that's really well observed. So yeah, Danny is this kid's name. I also wanted to ask, do you have any experience with moving as a kid? This is something I don't. Like, I've almost always lived in the same place that I did growing up. So this is not not a military family, nothing like that. Even just in terms of having to move schools or homes, like, did you have to do that when you were younger?
Yes, I experienced moving schools. I didn't experience moving communities as a kid, but I did move schools, and I remember how that feels. I remember trying to assimilate into a new friend group, and I also grew up in a military community. So my mom worked on base, but we were civilian family, not military. But I probably, some years, a third of my class would have been military kids. And we had a rotating cast, right? People would come and go, and there would be very little warning. And it would be like, my dad's going overseas, or my whole family's going to Germany, and like, bye. And I even had a pen pal as a kid, a child from a military family who her family was abruptly posted to Germany, and we kept in touch by physical letter for a few years.
Oh, wow.
So I've seen it.
Dating you a little bit there.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I fear that I am. Letters? I'm terminal. I have terminal diagnosis of being 35. It's not curable.
Well, I'm almost there too. Again, super interested to get to the middle part of this episode. Okay, so Francine gets the chance to spy on LaDonna here. As they're doing practice, LaDonna has to speed away because of the dinner that her family is having with the Torres family. So they're having dinner, and then she and Danny decide to play soccer. And Francine is like, what could be taking her away from soccer practice? I'm going to spy on LaDonna. And she spies them playing around with the soccer ball. And Danny does say that he didn't make the soccer team for Mighty Mountain because he was too late for the tryouts. But conveniently, somebody is using their leaf blower, and Francine can't hear that. So she thinks that LaDonna is spying for Mighty Mountain and providing them information. And that's where the conflict of this episode comes in. And this is where I wanted to... I was thinking about this earlier, but I did want to say this whole conflict of this episode is really weird.
Contrived.
And kind of doesn't work.
Contrived.
Because the main thing is that, like, at the very beginning, Lakewood loses to Mighty Mountain quite badly. And then Arthur makes a joke of, like, oh, maybe they're spying on us. And Francine takes that too seriously. They lose to Mighty Mountain all the time. Like, it's a running joke in the show. They always lose to Mighty Mountain. They don't always. Like, sometimes they will beat them, but Mighty Mountain is frequently like even in the early seasons of the shows, they're like, Mighty Mountain.
Right.
And it's just like, it's not outside the realm of possibility that you guys would get your butts kicked by Mighty Mountain.
Right.
Like,
they're
in fact,
better.
it's probably like going to happen.
Established.
If you don't,
that they're a better team.
Exactly. Like, you will probably lose, and badly. So you don't need to have been spied on to lose, So immediately I was like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So
it's a little slapstick where it's like, oh, here comes the leaf blower. Oh no, right? Like, it's very contrived. But I also think, like, you could argue the other side where it comes to, like, Mighty Mountain is a familiar thing in the universe, and instead of bringing in a totally fresh new, like, story element, they're leaning on something that people are familiar with. So, like, it kind of makes sense in that way, but it isn't how you lose at soccer. Like, if the better, like, if we know they're a better team, they're winning because they're better at soccer. It's not that deep, but it also kind of, like, kids do, like, get fanciful ideas in their heads. That's a thing. Yeah. There's an established pattern, something that does happen, like, across societies and across time, is that someone who's new to the community is going to come under suspicion and is going to be scapegoated for something bad that's happening. That is a tale as old as time.
You're making me feel a little bit better about this episode, but it's still, it's a little bit forced.
Yes.
But I will say that we get a montage of Francine trying to spy on LaDonna, including being bothered by bugs as she, like, crouches behind garbage cans because she feels that LaDonna is spying for Mighty Mountain, even though LaDonna and Danny are just becoming friends. Francine even tries to entrap her. Sorry, there's one thing I have to mention. So Lucas and I, as I said many times, and we'll continue to say, we are not animation experts. We do not work in animation. Frequently, we don't have the correct words to talk about animation. But I can tell you when things look weird to me. There is a weird shot here. So Francine is using her cell phone to try to video LaDonna and Danny. As we will see later, Francine is really bad at using her cell phone to film things. But there's a shot where we see it from Francine's perspective. She moves her cell phone into the frame to video LaDonna. But her cell phone, the screen is not colored differently enough from the shot itself. Like, there's no blue filter or LCD screen. So it just kind of looks like she's moving a hollow phone case. And it just looked really weird for me. There's like 2 instances in this episode of this happening, and it looks weird every time. And I just wanted to mention that.
That's so interesting. I didn't notice that. I did notice that the phone looks kind of like BlackBerry era looking phone.
Yes. Yeah.
And I also noticed that how much more incompetent could you possibly be at spying, and how did the kids not see you like 6 feet away? Like, something about the way that the shot is, like, she's in the shot with them, she's right there, like, she's not small, and she's probably not being quiet. Like, how, when she knocks over the garbage cans, what, they just didn't notice? That's like, it adds to that, like, extremely contrived scenario that's going on.
Strikes me as very, like, theatrical in the sense of, like, a play of, like,
oh yeah,
let's just say that they don't see her, instead of, like, they don't for this reason. Francine has a gotcha here for LaDonna. Eventually, she sets her up with a secret play for soccer practice that she has a diagram of it on a piece of paper. So she gives it to LaDonna, expecting LaDonna to give it to Danny. And in spying on her, Francine does see her passing a folded piece of paper to Danny. So she accuses LaDonna of being the spy during their next Money Mountain game. But the paper that LaDonna handed Danny was a typewritten invitation to a barbecue?
A thing again, children famously do when they have access to cell phones.
Like it's not just like
it's like a wedding invitation. What is going on?
It's like properly paragraphed and everything. It's like a letterhead. It's just like, dear sir, please find enclosed.
I mean,
give me a chance to do a hip hop dance. Sincerely, LaDonna. Just like, what? Oh, I mean, okay.
Kids will play and do like make paper crafts for fun and like write things out, like and like use up their parents' printer ink. Like, I do remember doing that. But it's
but like
contrived.
No smiley faces, no clip art, nothing.
No,
they're 8 years old. Come on, you got to put some clip art in there.
Yeah. Dear sir, yeah, no, it doesn't make sense. It's fair, and like it could have been anything. It could have been a hangman game or a drawing they were working on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it could have been anything, and they chose this. They did establish that they're going to have this gathering at the end of the episode, so like I guess it's kind of signposting to that. But why isn't it handwritten then? Like,
I don't know.
It doesn't make sense.
It's the typewritten part of it that I'm like, what?
What is going on? Yeah, I don't.
Just a little bit unnatural.
I guess
there's something strange about it.
I mean, the scriptwriter is maybe they've been working on Arthur since that era, or it's like an older person that hasn't clued in that that's not a thing kids do.
And then the episode ends with the gang coming together, like everything's cleared up. Francine does apologize and shake LaDonna's hand, and they're all making friends with Danny. They're playing charades after the game. LaDonna, her thing is Francine getting a goal scored on her by Mighty Mountain, and then they all go to play soccer, so they're all becoming friends with Danny. This is a thing that has been happening lately with characters who are introduced in an episode. I never expect to see them again. Now, sometimes in these later seasons of Arthur, they will introduce a character, sometimes of like decent importance. Mm-hmm. Like they'll get a whole episode and then they'll never be used again, or they'll just be used very, very little. So we may see Danny again. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the only appearance of him.
That's so interesting. And he also resembles a past Arthur character, right? I want to say George. Like
he does a little bit. He's a rabbit, and George is a moose. But I mean, there are only so many base models that you can go through before you maybe start to get a little ones that look a little familiar.
George is a rabbit. I thought George was a dog. Oh my goodness. Okay, don't.
No, George is a moose.
No, not George. What the hell is the kid's? Heck is the kid's name? Danny. Danny is.
Yeah. Actually, the picture I have in my head is a rabbit, but let me confirm
I have it in front of me.
It's all in the ears. So it depends on what the ears look like.
They're floppy. He is a dog. Danny is a dog, in my opinion.
Danny is a dog. You're absolutely right.
LaDonna is a rabbit. Okay, yeah. Sorry, we're gonna cut this whole part out. That doesn't make sense. I was struggling.
I don't know. I feel like I might leave it in because it gives me time to say it's really hard to say LaDonna and Danny.
LaDonna and Danny. Yeah, it's hard.
I had to really lock in instead of saying LaDanny and Donna. I was this close. So yeah.
Yeah, you can't read too much into who is what animal. Because why are they
no, you can't.
Why are they the same size? Why are they walking on two legs? Like, we could have a long conversation about that, right? And we'd never get anywhere.
No, it's best that we just move on. And now, a word from an army sergeant. An army sergeant.
Oh, do I have thoughts about this? But I want to hear from you first.
I figured you do, Jenna. So let me just set it up for everybody so we're all on the same page. Normally it's a word from us kids. No, it's a word from an army sergeant because a human man is talking to us in this thing. His name is Sergeant Jason Chin from the U.S. Army National Guard, and he is a father in a military family, like LaDonna's family. So he has a wife, a young son, and a younger daughter. And this segment is about him surprising his 7-year-old son, Caden, after he's returning home after a deployment of 11 months. So they have this whole presentation in Caden's school where he's going to be holding up the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. And then his dad comes in and they do the whole thing where he runs through him. They give him a big hug. You've seen those types of videos where it's like soldier returns after a year in deployment and it's, everybody's crying. It's very sad, all that kind of stuff. The only thing I want to mention, this is very informational. Sometimes we do get a little bit of placement in terms of where this is taking place in the Word From Us Kids segment. We do specifically say the school that Caden goes to, or went to, probably doesn't go to anymore, is Thompson Elementary in North Andover, Massachusetts, which Massachusetts, frequent filming location for WGBH Boston.
Interesting.
So
yeah, makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so Jenna, I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about this.
It's really, really interesting. So I have a bit of experience, as a journalist in the past about how you, work with institutions to get them into media. And when it comes to the U.S. military, they have a very active role in any time they're going to be represented on TV, in a film, whatever, you are going to be interfacing with the DoD. It's called the Defense Entertainment Media Office. So there is, and it's very, very likely that not only because we see military personnel on screen, that is all brokered by military public affairs. It's very likely they also got sign off on the whole episode that represents the military family.
Right.
And I looked it up, and that segment was produced by Deb Frank, who is like a producer on Arthur. So,
yep.
Bunch of things that I noticed. I'm not super comfortable with them showing this like kind of emotional family moment on camera. I think that's like something that a kid that age doesn't necessarily really understand the implications of. I hope that it's staged. I hope that wasn't actually his real reunion with a parent. It also, I know that if it ended up not going the way that they would have hoped, they wouldn't have included it, right? But like kids can have an unexpected reaction to something like that, right? He could have cried, he could have run away and gotten upset. Like I don't feel great about that being represented. I do love the representation of like the struggle of the military family, right? And like what those kids go through. That's so many American kids. I think that resonates a lot. This segment crossed over from representation to messaging. And we see the little boy say, "My dad keeps our country safe."
Yeah.
Now we're in military propaganda territory. And like, I mean that from a technical academic sense, that it fits the definition. And this is also like an earlier era, like who knows when this segment is filmed, but like it's still war on terror times, right? And there's tons and tons of kids that have their parent on deployment. And this is like normalizing this. This is the way it always has been. It's the way it should be. and we're proud of this. He's keeping our country safe, right? This is a sort of light consent manufacturing for kids. And we want to be, I think, really, really conscious of that, where we see the difference between just showing these kids' struggles, helping hold kids' hand through expressing empathy, to normalizing this and having military messaging in the mouth of a kid.
I was feeling a little part of that as well, but I didn't quite know how to communicate it as effectively as you did. First of all, for context, this episode would have aired in October 2017. Probably this segment would have been filmed in anywhere from 2015 to early 2017. So that's around the time that we're talking about. I also kind of felt the same way watching the reunion part of it. And I did say, I made mention of, like, you've probably seen videos like this. Yeah. And I think that, especially since the advent of YouTube and, like, streaming media and all that kind of stuff, it's like those types of it's like the two-pointer of viral videos that are meant to make its audience cry. And you're right. I often think that they are taken at face value, and it's tough to understand the implications. I think you make a great point there. It's just like, it is a weird thing to capture on film when the emotional reaction to it might not be so cut and dry as daddy or mommy is home, I'm happy, even though the kid literally says I'm happy to have my dad home. And maybe it is as simple as that. But I also kind of took note of, like, when I was listening to it, just like, my dad protects the country, and then it gets into, like, well, I mean, that's how a 7-year-old would understand it, and
yes,
that's probably how it was explained to him, and maybe that's even how his dad understands it. I don't know. But you and I watching in our 30s is just like, well,
yeah, it's not a fact, it's an ideology, right? And, like, it's a way a lot of people understand this. But yeah, this does absolutely fit within the definition of propaganda, which is, like, it's communication in service of a goal bypassing reason. Right? It's using your, it's working on your emotions, and it's, like, creating that satisfying resolution where it's like, oh, this is the way things should be. This is normal, right? And it has that, like, happy moment and the happy family, and doesn't get into, like, the trauma that is, like, comes along with this, and the long-term family separation, sort of frames that as an inevitable and positive part of military life. If it's all right
to mention, like, the reason that you are clued into this is because you come from the world of journalism. Like, this is something that is is part of your job. It's part of your background. This is something that you think about a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And I also, like, I work in journalism, but I primarily am an educator, and I teach journalism school, and I teach electives on like, misinformation and how propaganda works. And that's what clued me in here, is some of that like, academic work that I'm familiar with. And I'm familiar with working with, like, government public affairs, which is the institution that would have helped bring this segment to life. And they exercise a lot of control, a huge amount of control over what is said and what gets signed off on. And this is not, like, independently produced. This is not like a news segment. Even a news segment, they're going to exercise a lot of control as well. But, like, this is of a piece with other media where you see the U.S. military represented, and they've always taken a really active role in shaping how they are represented in media. And if you've ever interacted with, like, military public affairs trying to get a quote from somebody, you know how intensely controlled that messaging is. And, that's what kind of triggered me to notice where they crossed over from representation, which I love, to messaging, where it's like, you should be more critical and more thoughtful. That's not to say that it's wrong to say that the military protects us, or that it's wrong to have a segment like this. I just think that you want to be conscious of how it's made and what it's for. And who the audience is, which is kids, right?
Children. Yeah. I think that I would love to hear from other listeners who have been involved with the military in some way, whether you are formerly with the military, currently with the military, if you were part of a military family. This is the most explicitly, like, both in this segment and through the character of LaDonna, that the military has been a part of Arthur. And I do know that there is an episode coming up in a few seasons that directly deals with LaDonna and her status as part of a military family. So this, and really a lot of times when we get the, a word from us kids that isn't from us kids, it's from like the perspective of maybe like a business owner. One time it was like a firefighter, and it's just like, it's all to kind of help to introduce kids to parts of their community. And this is, part of that. And I really resonate with what you're talking about with where it turns from representation into what was the word you used? Messaging. And I wonder, for those of you who have ties to the military, like how do you think it comes across? Even I would encourage everybody to watch this segment and to just see how you feel about it, because I think it's interesting to see Arthur the show having this as part of it. It feels like a little bit of a turn from what they normally do. The only other thing I wanted to say about it is that we get a segment of this where the 7-year-old Caden is talking about the stuff that he's doing with his dad, like they're playing tag and they like to play video games together. Of course, but I'm curious because those are real controllers. They're Xbox 360 controllers. I just want to know what they're playing together. I'm going to guess Viva Pinata. I don't know. That seems to be a good Xbox 360 game to play with your kid. Because I was afraid, like, they wouldn't show this, obviously, but I was afraid that, like, what are they playing, COD or something?
God.
Like, that's...
No, I don't think they're plugged into anything. They're like smashing buttons, being like, I love video games. So do I, Dad. It's just, they probably had to film it a bunch of times, like, do B-roll. Yeah, it didn't look very convincing. It was cute. I don't want anybody to perceive that I'm like hating on this child or this family that,
of course not,
put a bunch of their time into doing this and showed what their life is like for kids to look at. Like, I think that's largely positive, but I am familiar with like trumped up B-roll, which is, what you call that kind of, like footage that you gather for a segment like this. And I thought it was cute. It's notoriously hard to get kids to do stuff on camera and make it look natural.
Totally. And it is, as you said, the parts that are representative for a certain part of a largely American population watching this. That's the good part. It's just how it came to be in the first place and what exists under it is worth thinking about. So Jenna, I'm glad that you brought that to the forefront.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this kind of stuff.
Hi everybody, it's Lucas, your favorite co-host from Elwood City Limits. I want to remind you folks that if you like listening to the podcast, first and foremost, the best way to spread the love is to tell a friend who is interested in Arthur or podcasts or animation or hearing about Nova Scotia for some reason. But there's some other things you could do as well. For instance, you can follow us on social media. Twitter is @ECL Podcast. The Instagram is @Elwood City Limits. My pet project, the Twitch channel, which we do live streams on sometimes, twitch.tv/Elwood City Limits Pod. And we also have a Facebook and Tumblr as well. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and youtube.com/Elwood City Limits. That's where Will has been diligently uploading all of the episodes if they're not on your podcast listening service of choice. If they aren't on one of those services, let us know. You can reach out to us on social media or via email at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. Finally, the Patreon is where you can find all of our paywall content, patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. This gives you access to the Discord, where we have a bustling community, as well as some exclusive videos, audio bonuses, such as commentary for the various Arthur movies and more, as well as some of our additional podcasts. For the kids is where me and Will cover all the PBS shows that aren't Arthur, as well as ECL Origins, where we really talk about any show from our childhood that we want. And most importantly, you get early access to every episode of ECL. You get to flex on your friends that you're getting it a week early. You can join for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. And now, back to the show.
And now, back to Arthur.
Now we're going to talk about Sue Ellen and the Last Page. And you mentioned earlier about how new technology creeps its way into Arthur. This is not new to us necessarily. Of course, we've seen Francine with her BlackBerry type phone. This cold open starts with Muffy. She's created a channel on YooHooTube, and it's called Muffy's World. Well, she didn't create it. Bailey set it up for her, and Brain did the graphics, and Muffy paid him. But she's got her own YooHooTube channel that she's going to be filming vlogs with.
I thought that was so funny. That's what kids dream of being, right? Like, that's
Yep.
such a huge part of their life that it almost, like, my first reaction is like, oh my God, take this, like, Arthur is like a pure and beautiful world. Like, stop bringing gross, horrible things into it, like YouTube. But, like, that is omnipresent in the universe of being a kid these days. So they can't exclude it. And I thought it was so funny. And, like, Muffy's economic relationships with the rest of the community is something somebody needs to write a PhD thesis on, because she's like a little mini capitalist, right? Like she's
Absolutely.
She's outsourcing.
She's gonna be doing this first preliminary vlog with Sue Ellen and Francine. They do one outside the Sugar Bowl, so it's not so much the technology. I've been used to the technology getting more and more modern. It's when Muffy said her and her squad that I was like, oh my God, no. And not even to say like squad, the term is a little bit out these days.
Yeah.
But it was just oh no, she knows what squad means. I'm so old. Time's getting away from me.
I know that it's like part of the vernacular now, and you're like, okay. They did kind of like they remarked on it. Like I think Francine was like, squad? Like one of them, they didn't just let it pass. Right.
But that also felt like the writers being like, what does that mean? It's just like Francine would know what squad means. Like as an 8-year-old, she would know. Like eventually, like I think it might end before this, but I wouldn't be surprised if in like the last season we hear an Arthur character say, let's go or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. They would say Riz or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll deal with that if it comes to it. I also wanted to note, same visual problem that I had with Francine's cell phone in the last story. When they go to the library, Muffy moves her tablet to shoot the library sign, and it also kind of just looks like a shell of a tablet. It looks like the screen is not colored enough to make it look like a screen. But as they are filming these vlogs, they go to the library, the Elwood City Library, which of course is a very important secondary location for the Arthur characters, and they find out that the library may be closing. There's a sign on it that they're having a book sale to get rid of books because they may be closing. Miss Turner, the librarian, confirms that the library may in fact be losing its funding from City Council. Now, of course, as we've said many times, Lucas and I have very strong ties to the library. Lucas's mother literally worked at a library for most of his childhood. I think maybe still does. I love the local library. It's been a big part of my life for a long time. Genna, I feel like I don't even have to guess. I'm sure the library means a lot to you as well.
Yes, I am the world's foremost library pusher, and I am a huge, absolute huge user and supporter of the library. I love to see the library represented, although the way it's represented in this is kind of complicated and interesting.
Ooh. Okay.
They start talking about how, people aren't as interested in getting books out because they're reading online.
That was another one where I was like, okay, well, wait a second, hang on. It was a little too easy and not actually true, because this is obviously speaking years after this would air, but my local libraries and many, many, many globally have been able to embrace reading things online. I use the Libby app all the time. I was using it this week to read a book, which is all about borrowing ebooks. And it's the huge part of libraries now. They have a whole system for it. So online reading, if anything, has emboldened the importance of libraries even more.
It sets it up as in opposition to the library. There's either online or there's the library. And a little bit later in the episode, we start to see some of the other things the library does, and that they do have computers and things like that. But I thought it was interesting that not that, how are you going to show like political neglect in like a kid's show, right? But like they blame the potential downfall of the library on like structural issues. Oh, people are going online, not our library's underfunded. It's not being prioritized.
It's such an old school view of what a library is. Where
yes.
It's like you only go there for books. And today the library is a community hub, and it's so much more than books.
Oh yeah, I'm there all the time. I go there as a public space to be in, a third space to be in. You don't have to buy a coffee like you would if you were working in the cafe, and tons of community resources.
They do sort of walk that back at the end of the episode, but initially it does feel that like there's the library and then there's digital. It's just like it's really not that simple. In fact, it's not really that at all. We do get a cutaway here. This is where I was talking about the old school Arthur references. So Sue Ellen imagines herself, she obviously doesn't want the library to go away. It means a lot to her. She imagines herself as a superhero with a cape and mask and everything called Library Saver, who literally stops the wrecking ball from destroying the library. We even get a cameo from, this was an episode in season 2, Buster Baxter, Cat Saver.
Oh, wow. That went right over my head. Now that you said it, my brain just had the loading screen from that episode. But wow, I didn't catch that at all. That's awesome. That was for you.
And this is the arc of the episode where it's like Sue Ellen is very passionate about saving the library. Muffy initially doesn't see the point of it. She says they could replace it with something useful, like a boutique. And I'm just like, shut up, Muffy. Yeah. Like, Muffy has grown a lot on us, me and Lucas, as time has gone on, but every once in a while, she can still be very, very ignorant.
It's consistent with the Muffy character, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah, that we know she's materialistic, and I remember looking at Muffy's closet, like her epic, enormous walk-in closet with her hundreds of outfits, and it's in character for Muffy. It's a little obnoxious though.
So Sue Ellen decides that she's going to speak at a council meeting on Friday where they're going to have open comments from the public about the library funding. And she even tries to get the word out. This is something I'm glad that Arthur has never lost, is the community organization spirit. This has been present from the first season and is still present in this one. Sue Ellen makes flyers to spread the word about the library's potential closure. She puts it all around town. Unfortunately, it doesn't lead to all that good of a turnout. When she's handing these out and during this council sequence, there's quite a few cameos from Mark Brown. Mark Brown has been animated several times into the show, especially in this season, and his character model is one of the background characters here, the author of Arthur, Mark Brown.
That's so adorable. I love that so much. I didn't catch that, but I love it so much.
When Sue Ellen says that nobody's there, Muffy says, "It's a Friday. Sensible people are out having fun." And this is like, yeah, no, that's totally fair. When they leave the floor open for people to speak, Buster gets up and says that he feels the library is important because it would prove to aliens that we were an advanced society, not just a bunch of hairy animals glued to our cell phones. And he's treated like the weird crank that he talks like sometimes.
I thought that was funny. That was like a small call to a sort of annoying boomer that might be at a meeting like this. I thought that was kind of funny. Weird thing for Buster to say, maybe, but it's got that meta level of they are hairy animals.
Yeah, of course.
I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, he's not an effective political orator on the level of Sue Ellen.
No, certainly not. Sue Ellen actually makes a really effective speech that ties into her personal feelings about how the library, when she moved there to Elwood City, it helped her to become acclimated to the area. It helped her make friends, and it's really something that means a lot to her. Her speech is received very well, but unfortunately the headline news the next day is that the council has voted to close the library, which is very demoralizing to Sue Ellen, who did all that effort for seemingly nothing. But it's in doing that effort that Muffy is able to see it in a different way, where she understands that the library actually does matter a lot to her, and she decides to help Sue Ellen. Thankfully, in her vlogging adventures, she recorded Sue Ellen on her tablet and made up a video. Basically, she made a Yoo-hoo-tube poop of Sue Ellen's speech. There's a lot of really cheesy effects that she put on there.
The cap cut. It was so funny.
Exactly. It's I don't know, Spider-Man Movie Maker. There's lasers shooting out of Sue Ellen's eyes. They do the meme from the old meme of dropping the sunglasses on Brain. And this is boy, it's been a while since I've seen that one. But
2010. That is 2010 core.
crazy graphics, all this kind of stuff. And Muffy thinks that it could potentially help them by creating a video. They could help to raise funds to keep the library open. I will also mention the thing that helps Muffy come around is that she realizes that she was the first person in their class to get a library card. Now, she did think that it was closer to like a credit card. She thought it was something to do with money, but all the same, it did help her to understand at a young age the importance of the library. Sue Ellen goes around with like not a tablet, but I think like an actual camcorder to talk to her various friends and people around the community about what they love about the library. They create a video for Muffy's YouTube channel and for a fundraising campaign, #LoveALibrary. I have to mention this because this is something of a meme for our community. The Mrs. Fink kid does make an appearance. This kid's name is Kenny, according to the Arthur Wiki, which I'm sure we brought up before. And he does have one line. He doesn't have the annoying voice anymore, but he does have a strange voice that's not in the normal Arthur cast. So he does get another appearance.
I love that you get like a little portrait of the community and you see a bunch of people that you don't usually see. I thought that was really fun.
Well, and that's another thing that Arthur does, the show does really well, is that it has always been very community focused, and I think that those are values that are slowly coming back into vogue for a lot of people around our age and younger.
So yes and no, because I have some critiques of the way that the political process is represented here.
Oh, go for it.
They do not show the political process working. They show something that this, younger generation of kids, I think, like, does resonate with, which is regular organizing and collective action fails. Making change is synonymous with virality, right? That's how you get what you want done. Regular collective action where you go to your leaders who are supposed to lead and are supposed to do what's best for the community. That doesn't work. You've got to go viral and you've got to get attention, right? And you've got to be as attention grabbing as possible and put lots of effects on and stuff. And you've got to raise money from private citizens too. They show that happening. They show basically like crowdfunding, right? They don't show, hey, this is a community resource and we should all be paying for it collectively. They don't talk about taxes. They have a GoFundMe.
That's right, yeah.
Really notice that is representing like that as the effective way to make a change. And we can talk later about the philanthropy that's then represented as well.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's unfortunately, it's darkly, not prescient, but it's just like reflective of the times. I mean, how many times have you and I seen GoFundMe campaigns for people primarily in the United States who are just like, I need this to basically to live.
Yes.
And it's just like, which is different than raising money for a library, but the effectiveness of crowdfunding campaigns, or even the necessity of crowdfunding campaigns for like necessary life-saving services. And I wouldn't count the library among that, but I do think it is an important community resource in any community. So yeah, it is a little bit dark if you think about how it reflects where reality is. I didn't even consider that, but you're totally right.
Yeah, and I mean, the unity between the GoFundMes we see that are for healthcare and the GoFundMe for library, in both cases, something that we would normally conceptualize as a public service. And that instead is being done like through a fundraiser, through attention-grabbing means, like go viral by any means. I thought that was really interesting. I did love, though, where we see the different community members talk about how the library has benefited them.
Yes.
I thought that was great. It's, also is making me reflect on me about how I was critical and encouraging critical consumption of the military propaganda, but I am all in for the library propaganda.
But like, I mean, this is just my bias. It's like, I don't see the drawback with library propaganda.
No, neither do I. I'm all for it. And bias,
and
that's
Arthur
fine.
has been library propaganda since day one.
Having fun is not hard if you have a library card.
Exactly.
Yes.
Like, we know what we're about. Like, Arthur is going to go to the mat for the library, and I support it.
Yeah, me too. I love it. I wish the Arthur government would step up, though. What are they doing?
Absolutely. The Elwood City Council decides to cut funding, but they do allow the library to remain open. The library is going to remain open, but they are going to lose funding, which means that they aren't going to be able to offer the same services that they normally do, and they won't be able to purchase new computers. But while this is going on, Muffy finds a picture of her mom and dad at a dance that we find out was at the library. The information on the back of the picture is that it was the Shout and Shake dance, which took place in 1993. So if the Crosswires, let's say they're like in their early 20s maybe in that picture, then they would be born sometime around 1970 or so, which I feel like probably wasn't the case when Arthur aired in 1997, but you were doing that Simpsons thing where it's like every few years everybody gets a little bit closer to like yours and my age, Jenna.
I know. I thought that was so interesting that because they make a point of not doing numerical signaling. Like they never talk about how much money the library needs.
Yes,
right? Because
you're right.
that's going to become dated with inflation. But they do show
Sure.
the year 1993, which they didn't have to do. They could have just shown them in like the dated clothing and said, oh, it was in the past, right? I thought it was interesting that like we're pegging things to a year because, yeah, it doesn't. The relationship between the characters in time, you can't think about it too hard or it collapses because they're perpetually in third grade as suddenly technology's moving around them. And yeah, I thought that was kind of funny and interesting. And I wonder why they showed a year.
Yeah, maybe it's important to some of the creative staff or something like that. But this photo becomes important to the end of the episode here, which we're basically at. Sue Ellen and Muffy donate their proceeds from the video fundraiser, but it's still not quite enough for what the library needs. So they enlist Muffy's dad, Ed Crosswire, for financial help. And with their help, they open up the Crosswire Motors Computer Oasis, which is a brand new computer lab room for the library with new computers. And Mr. Crosswire says that he and his wife met at that library dance in 1993, so it means a lot to them personally. And we have like a dance to end the episode, which was a little like end of a DreamWorks movie for me.
It was given a little bit of Bollywood or High School Musical energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's how we end that episode.
And, it is also representing, okay, if you're going to get what you want for a public service, you're going to have to rely on the individual generosity by choice of the uber rich in your community, right? And they are going to give to something that benefited them personally. And they're also going to choose what they donate. They're going to donate computers. Not poor. What's the librarian's name? Not her poor salary.
Miss Turner, yeah.
When did Miss Turner have a raise? Has she had a raise the whole time she's been there?
This is why I like having a journalist on the show. We ask all these questions that Lucas and I, we've been embedded in Elwood City for too long. We don't even ask the questions anymore. We need fresh eyes to be like, hey, wait a second.
Hey, yeah. I'm about to outstage a revolution in Elwood City.
Oh, man. Maybe that'll be the plot of the movie or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so now's the time of the episode where we just kind of give our thoughts on the stories that we just watched. So, Jenna, what did you think of Francine and the Soccer Spy?
I think if Francine is going to go all in on the spy life, she's going to need to go to spy college because that was lackluster. That was junior leagues. Conceal yourself. What are you doing? You're 6 feet away. I think if you're going to spy, then spy. Do better recon, like her intelligence was bad. What did that paper say? She didn't know. So, either if you're gonna do shenanigans, then you better come correct. That's how was my general feeling of that. My other general feeling is that I really appreciated them modeling welcoming a new person to their community and also meeting that person where they were at in terms of what they needed. They didn't want to be overwhelmed with a huge social event right away. I really, really liked that. I thought that was a really positive message. And despite the critique that I gave, I think it was a really positive representation of military families and the stress that they go through.
No, I think that those are really valid, and they help to kind of soften my own feelings on the episode, which is that I don't know. I thought it was okay. As a story, I kind of had structural problems with it in terms of like, why are we doing this? So it didn't super come together for me. It's like definitely seen worse for sure. But yeah, it really didn't do all that much for me. I'm also starting to get a tiny bit annoyed with introducing new named characters that I may never see again. So Danny, prove me wrong, but I don't expect to ever see him again. It's like, well, then why did we spend all this time? I don't know. Like I said, just a little annoyance there that is growing and certainly isn't Danny's fault. But the spy thing in the cold open was at least a little fun, but I didn't really think that much of this episode. I would actually say I feel the opposite about Sue Ellen and Les Page. I actually quite like this episode. And of course, as Jen and I have said, library propaganda is a big part of that. That's a big way for me to like practically anything, including this very show that I've been podcasting about for a long time. But it was cool to have Sue Ellen take this. She is a character that I absolutely believe has that sort of protester, community organizer spirit, and I think that that's always an important thing to refresh about the inherent values that the Arthur show and the Arthur property has, is that it is a very community-focused show. It's about making friends and keeping ties with your family and organizing within your community for positive change. And I think that I really appreciate, Jenna, your perspective on this, because although I believe that that's what it's saying on the surface, the way that they got there is very interesting and I think it's certainly meant to speak to where America was at the time and still pretty much is, in terms of like, well, if you want to get really effective community organizing done, how does it happen? Well, it happens because you have a wealthy friend who has a wealthy father.
Yeah.
Not because of the grassroots organizing and the passion that you put into it. That helps, but you also need a modern lens to put it through so that more people will listen, which is unfortunate. It is unfortunate. I don't think it's untrue, but it's just not quite as uplifting as it seems from its face. But I did think it was interesting to think about, and I just am glad that all these years later, Arthur as a show is still going toe-to-toe for libraries, even if there are ways in which we have to get it done. It's not like in the first season where we get a library book back, like where we're taught as kids that written petitions work.
Yeah.
Which is like something as you grow up is just like, well, no, not really. But at the time, maybe, and now it's just like, well, secretly we're also kind of saying that, yeah, that's like all that stuff. You need power behind it, and it's not power in and of itself. So that's too bad. But I did like this episode. I love the ways that it interacted with modern technology, and I thought that was and vernacular, and I thought that was really funny. And I quite like this one. What about you, Jenna?
I liked it. I loved that it showed the library as being central to the community and having something for everyone. And we look outside of just the immediate friend circle and we see everybody benefiting from the library and participating in the library. I thought that was beautiful. And I loved, even though I had critiques of the way it represented the political process, I loved that it shows kids participating in the political process and kids organizing and making change in their community.
Yes.
I think that could be super, super inspiring. I loved it. And I have like a final thought on it.
Of course.
Which is give Miss Turner a raise. Paige Turner. Her name is Paige.
Paige Turner.
Her name is Paige Turner. She's been working in Elwood City for how long? 21 seasons? She's
the whole time,
so underappreciated. All she does is work. I think in my head she's kind of a single lady, like an older millennial age. And she lives for these kids. And she's fighting for the library. She's fighting for their right to read. And if we're going to see the real life encroach on the Arthur universe, if we imagine that real life is encroaching on the Arthur universe when we don't see them, then there's a big storm coming for poor Ms. Turner, who's all on her own. She's about to be under attack, right? Libraries are going to come under, and we're already seeing that they're being politically neglected. They're about to be politically attacked. So give Ms. Turner a raise. Give Ms. Turner staff assistance. Protect Ms. Turner and the right to read in Elwood City.
Hell yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, Jenna, that is an Arthur episode where we are in Elwood City Limits. I'm super, super glad that you could join me for this, and I also hope that this has kind of put Arthur back in your head. There's still as Lucas and I have continued to find, there's a lot of interesting ways to think about the show.
Yes.
And about how to interact with it even when you are in your mid-30s.
It's a very rich text. I think it
Yes.
rewards analysis. It rewards careful attention. There's lots and lots to see here.
I 100% agree, and if I didn't, I wouldn't be here. So, Genna, obviously, everybody, thank you for listening to Elwood City Limits. Genna, if people are interested to hear more from you, where can they go? And what sort of things do you have on the go that you'd like people to know about?
So you can keep up with what I'm up to on my own website, which is just gennabuck.com, GENNABUCK.com. I also use Twitter, Genna_Buck, GENNA_BUCK. And I have a podcast coming out later this year. It's called Pages Past, and we're revisiting important texts and books that we read so long ago that we were a different person the last time we read them, and we're going to revisit them and analyze them closely, very similarly, I hope, to how you guys analyze episodes of Arthur. That podcast is to come. It's called Pages Past. It will be at patreon.com/pagespast. And I hope that you check it out when it comes out.
I can say I will try not to spoil, but I will say that I had a fantastic experience doing that podcast, and I can't wait to hear the final product because you and I brought it in terms of the discussion.
I hope so.
And
yeah.
with everything that you have been learning and putting into podcast production, I really think it could be a superior product, and I'm so excited for everybody to be able to hear it. So believe me, we will be letting everyone know who is following us on social media when that podcast comes out. I really think it's a can't miss. If the episode I was on has anything to say about it, there's got to be some even better ones in the chamber once that podcast sees the light of day, and I can't wait to listen to it.
Will killed it. I'm so excited for you guys to hear it. Thank you so much for having me. This was a riot. I had so much fun.
Well, we may have to have you back before all's said and done, but for right now, thanks everybody for listening to Elwood City Limits. My name's Will Young, and for Genna Buck,
having fun isn't hard if you have a library card.
Can't go wrong with the classics. We'll see you next time.
Bye.